Hey guys, what is up? It is Flood here. I'm so sorry for the lack of lectures, but here it is. Lecture 7, we're going to be talking about peaking. This lecture is going to be super complicated. We're just going to talk about all the things that a lot of people do wrong and what you guys can do right and how to do these things right. Because at the end of the day, keeping peaking simple is almost always going to be more effective for newer and intermediate players, even advanced players at some points. Alright guys, so we're going to quickly run over some typical errors people make, including myself. It's peeking the same angle multiple times, not changing your position. So sometimes changing an angle might be just running to a different window, but completely changing your position or ensuring that your position is safe and defendable is super important, and it's a big error that people make. Being predictable, it's super easy to kill people when they are predictable, and I'll give you guys an example of me being quite predictable. And so you know that even I do this mistake quite a lot, actually. A lot of pros make mistakes all the time. That's why we get better, because we're willing to make mistakes and learn from them. And then the last two is peaking too slow and too fast. Now, these two kind of go hand in hand. They're just as bad as each other. If you're doing a slow peak with someone already holding your angle, you're going to lose. And if you're doing a peak that is, you're going too fast and it's out of your skill set, you're not going to hit any shots and you are still going to potentially get hit. Because no matter how fast you peak, there's still a chance you get tagged. But if you're peaking too fast, you might just not hit any bullets, and that is not what we want. So we'll go over some examples really quickly. Discuss the main error that I see a lot of people making, especially when it comes to peaking, and that is purely just peaking the same angle twice and never really changing anything up. Now, I want to give you guys some examples of what you can do to change things up. The most common thing to do is completely changing an angle, right? So for example, we have someone in this window. One of the techniques that I use is a Korean peak, and essentially it is where we are not leaning right. We are simply standing as close to the angle as possible, because this will actually show less of our body and less of our head. Bit of a trade secret. I'm sure plenty of people know about it because it's been out for so long, but not peaking with your right lean sometimes is better than peaking. So I would recommend hopping into a replay and seeing what this actually looks like for an enemy POV, but I will do that for you in future videos. I mean, in the next part of this episode, sorry. Whoops. Anyway, so we have a Korean peak as one of the examples we can use, right? We can have a little, I call it like a 1-2, so we're going a low peak, and then we're doing a high peak. Essentially what we're doing is moving our head position from a low position to a high position. Now this might make our recoil a little bit harder to control, so that's why I highly recommend starting with the high position, or starting, actually you can do either or, but honestly starting with the high position is better because they're going to aim high, and then we can peek low with our crouched recoil, which should give us enough time to kill them. We can also peek left, and then peek right, and then peek left again. We got to remember, if we start doing things that are very choreographed, people are going to predict us. Like pros predict me all the time if I'm too simple. Right, so we want to peek right, we want to peek right. Wait a second so they think we're peeking left, and then peek right again, right? But if we are just doing this, we're going to be shot. Like, our chances of losing a fight are much higher than if we are standing, we're crouching, and then we're standing, then we're crouching, we're holding Korean peak. Like, we need to mix things up, essentially. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into some games that I played recently and show you some of the types of errors that public players make, and some of the types of peaks that I'm doing, and also what a Korean peak actually looks like from the other perspective. So let's go and do that right now. Alright guys, I'm gonna show you a quick example of a Korean peak. So if you look at my perspective right now, I have just landed in power grid and I know that I need to hold something. So as you could see, I was leaning, but I identify this as a perfect time to hold a Korean peak. So I'm slowly edging forward and I see the peak come through. So I simply move a little bit to the right. But in doing so, it's made it very hard for my opponent to react to what I'm doing, especially in these public matches where you don't expect these types of angles to be held. It looks extremely confusing at times because right here, right, you can see I can pretty much see Z-Ant at this point. Like, you can only see half my body. I am pretty sure I should be able to. Never mind. So, oh wait, no, I can't actually see a good chunk. Like, look at this. This is the perspective we're looking at. That's kind of insane, no? And that's all because I'm not leaning right. I'm simply standing up or crouching and holding the tightest angle humanly possible. So of course, when I take a step to peek this, I'm gonna win straight away because it's so hard to put your crosshair on me peeking like that. And it's such an easy peek to learn, guys. I'm being serious. It is so simple to learn. So I really encourage you to hop into a training mode or just hop into a game and use it and see what it looks like from your opponent's perspective. All right, guys, so one of the first mistakes I'm going to point out is peeking the same angle. This is a super common one, and it actually, you feel like you're doing something great when you're peeking like this, but at the end of the day, it's actually quite predictable. So this guy here, he is peeking me. I'm up on the hill, and he is still using the same angle for an extended period of time. And what this is going to do is when I look at him, I can see him. You just saw what I did. I just changed my angle just the tiniest little bit. So if we go back and really slow it down, I have, if you can watch my positioning, right over here, you can see me. And because I know where this guy is, and he's peeking the same angle, it makes it extremely easy for me to knock him because I just have to pre-aim where his head will be. So as you can see in me, I'm peeking here, and I unpeek straight away because I know he's going to move his crosshair to where he saw me, right? And I've uncrouched, he doesn't know where I am, and then I've moved slightly over, right? But enough that he has to do something. And I've shot and unpeaked. So this guy has held the same angle for quite a while. Now, if you look at my perspective, I'm simply relaxing. I'm sitting up on a rock, and all I need to do is peek him. Is what I do. And I see right here, he's holding the same angle. And I see that he's looking at me. So all I do is take a few steps to the right, and then I put him down, right? Alright guys, now I want to show you an example of a really bad peek from myself. So in this game, I have wiped the team in the warehouses, and this player has shot at me with a Dragunov, so I know exactly where they are. And you can see I visualize and see where they are, and I know that they are holding an angle. So why would I re-peek an angle that someone is already holding? So by the time that I am able to shoot my bullets, the distance required for this player to move their crosshair onto where the angle I'm going to peek is very limited. Like, they don't have to do that much, right? And why is that? Because I've made my peek so predictable. You can see how simple it is, and you can understand my thought process to a T when you watch this replay. And that's not what you want. You never want anyone to be able to just guess exactly what you're going to do. So you can see I've made eye contact, and I have crouched, so I'm looking for the throw hands. And where can I peek? That's the only real spot that I can peek in the next second or two. And simply holding the angle, they see me and put me down. But when you look at my perspective of this, it's even worse, honestly. I kill this player, completely unrelated. I hear the Dragunov to my left. I see the player, and look at me. Instead of slowing down, which I should have, I am going for a slow peek. Like, look how slowly I'm moving away from my cover, and this player is staring at me. So I'm 100% dead. Pretty much every time there. Great shot. But you see how my peek, even though I know what I'm doing most of the time, like, my peek was poor, so I make a mistake and I get knocked for this. So in the same game, we have another critical error made by this man or person. Now, this person has the jump on Ronan and myself. We are both in the open, but the error that he makes is that his positioning is really, really bad. Why is that? Because he went from an angle where he can fully see me. If he just crouched right here, he would have a much better chance at knocking me. But because he's stepped out, now he has exposed himself to another angle. So really, peeking sometimes comes down to understanding your angles. So he is coming to peek me in a way that has exposed himself to not only me, but also Ronan. right? And this can all be negated by simply peeking inside this room. So you need to think about when you're peeking, like, are you exposed to things? Because a lot of the time, when public players and new competitive players play the game, they usually overexpose themselves to angles, right? And the point of peeking and learning how to peek better is to minimize the amount of angles you're exposed to. So in this situation, Korean peeking me here would have been the best thing for rare players to do, because Ronan would have no say in this. I would be able to see far less of his head. But when you look at my perspective of what his peak looks like, it looks quite goofy, because he is simply crouching in the open in a way that I can simply just shoot his head. Because he's standing still. He's crouched in the open. He has no cover. He only his entire body is exposed, right? So this is another mistake a lot of people make. So when we break down peaking and what type of things happen and how we can improve, well, we need to improve on 3 different things. We need to improve on positioning, and how we're going to do that? Well, game sense. Simply playing the game more and being more aware of our surroundings. Peaking is all about being aware of what you were exposed to in a given moment. And how are we going to do this? Well, playing more frequency, guys. Just play more games with this in mind. If you think about what you're doing, more likely that you're going to do the correct things. Now, angles, how to improve. Techniques, right? We've discussed holding different angles and what techniques you can use. Use a 1-2, use an up-down, left, right, left, improvise, like make your own personality essentially. Like every player has typical movements and patterns that they do because they have mastered certain alternations of peaking, right? So find what type of peaking works for you. Now, if you find that peeking the same angle multiple times works for you, that's awesome, but you are going to get slammed against better players. You need to make sure that you are approaching the game in a way that works against good players and works against bad players, right? So peeking and changing your angles is super important. And then speed. Speed's the last one. How do we improve speed? Well, first of all, do not search up bad boy peaks and try and learn that as your first step, right? Bad boy peaks are extremely complicated. I can't even do them properly all the time. But I need you guys to understand that peeking slowly is almost always more effective in PUBG, especially at the competitive level on the lower end, and especially in public matches, right? Obviously, peeking fast is better if you can hit your shots, but most people struggle to hit their shots when they peek as fast as some of the pros do, right? So you need to understand, when do I do these fast peeks? You need to do these fast peeks just to get a little bit of damage out, right? You want to damage your opponent and then unpeak and then peek again, right? Changing of position goes back to angles, go back to positioning. We need to make ourselves as difficult to hit as possible while dishing out as much damage reliably as possible. So don't worry too much about your speed peaks, but just make sure that when you do peek, you're hitting your bullets. And then once you have hit a few bullets, you can unpeak and change your angle. I promise you, it's going to make a night and day difference if you start doing a little bit of damage. Don't worry about putting your whole mag into someone straight away. If you can peek an angle, get a few good tags onto them, and then change your angle, it's going to be a lot easier to kill them on average because they have to do more. If you peek an angle for a long period of time, you have a higher chance of getting knocked. It's just my theory, right? So if you guys enjoyed this episode, it's a really short one, super basic, but just give you guys some ideas of what type of mistakes are being made so you can implement strategies in your own games to avoid these types of mistakes.